We are made for connection, and people just want to know you care about them enough to let them in and see your vulnerable self.
I am Gloria Grace Rand, founder of The Love Method and author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Live, Love, Engage: How to Stop Doubting Yourself and Start Being Yourself. In this podcast, we share practical advice from a spiritual perspective on how to live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically, so you can create a life and business with more impact, influence, and income. Welcome to Live, Love, Engage.
Namaste. Have you ever thought inviting strangers into your home could make your life richer and your business stronger? Well, stick around as my guest challenges everything you might think about hospitality and connection in today's world. This conversation might just change how you view strangers and success. But before I bring her on, I'd like to welcome those of you who may be new to Live, Love, Engage. I am Grace Rand, and I help female entrepreneurs attract clients through my definition of SEO, which is to spiritually engage others. And joining us today is Annie McCune. She is a connector, a lover of people, and author of Practicing Hospitality, the Joy and Grace of Loving Strangers. And Annie has opened her doors to hundreds of people from all over the world. And I can't wait to hear what she has to say about this subject. So without further ado, I'm going to bring her on and let's see if we can add her to the stage. There she is. So welcome, Annie, to Live, Love, Engage.
Hello, Gloria Grace.
Well, I want to just dive right in and talk about how genuine hospitality can really transform our lives and businesses, because I'm very, very intrigued by this. So I'm going to give you the stage here.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, we have just been a household who has always opened our doors. And so it helps when you come from a family like that. I grew up next to my grandmother, cousins on the other side. The doors were always open. Lots of people in and out, friends in and out. My dad would go to the International Institute in Buffalo and say, does anyone need a meal? And he'd bring people home for dinner, and not all the time, but my mother would like, okay. And so that was part of my journey. When I married my husband, we also just began opening our doors. And if we had an extra room and somebody needed one, we'd invite them in. And I know that brings up fear in a whole lot of people. Like, who are you letting in the door? And then as we went on, people would call us and say, hey, we know you take in people, we don't. Well, would you open your door? We have somebody from Kyrgyzstan. We have somebody from Afghanistan. We have the Polish boys choir. We've got the Scottish soccer team. We've got the Lithuanian group. And we ended up just having a lifetime of memories of fun, of growth for us, for our kids, by opening up our doors. So, but I don't want to scare people saying you have to do that. But as you know, we live in an age where now that we're through the COVID pandemic, we are facing an epidemic of loneliness and isolation. And the CDC says 1 in 3 are suffering from that. The Surgeon General just wrote like a 90-page missive on how he suffered from it and how we've got to do something about this. And people had always told me, oh, you should write a book. So we ended up moving to Atlanta. I had some time. I wrote the book. But in the middle of writing the book, I thought, I wonder if I really am practicing hospitality. What does hospitality really mean? Because I am the farthest thing from Martha Stewart. And I love Martha Stewart, and she is an inspiration to millions. And she did tell me that it's okay not to have matching placemats, which is really helpful. I find if I look at those things, then I get scared and I don't open my door. And so when I looked at the definition of hospitality, it actually comes from a root word, 𝙑𝙾𝙫𝙀, which means loving strangers as family. And I was shocked and relieved. It's kind of what we've been doing as a family. But I also realized that the false definition as being having to entertain really well, or having to have the bandwidth. If somebody invites me over, then I'm going to have to invite them over. The reciprocal, having to keep raising the bar is absolutely what frightens most people from opening their door in the first place. And so I really got excited about sharing just that word, 𝙑𝙾𝙫𝙀. Let's love strangers as family. Let's get over those fears. Let's just try it. Because I have found there is so much grace. There is so much joy. It's not about the food you cook. It's not about the decor. We are made for connection, and people just want to know you care about them enough to let them in and see your vulnerable self, which in my house is also, it's the messy desk. It's the things that look, oh, no, I wasn't expecting you, but I'm so glad you're here. It's that kind of loving family. If you're, I know you've had siblings, I know some of them have passed, but if one of them had showed up at your door, you wouldn't say, oh, sorry, go away. You'd let them in, because you just showed them some love and you wanted to be with them. And that's what we're kind of missing.
Well, lots of stuff is going through my head at the moment with that. Starting off, number one, just from when you were first talking about inviting all these people in, is I did remember that, well, number one, when I was a kid, we hosted exchange students from Norway, which was lovely. And then when my kids were younger, we actually had an opportunity to welcome a couple young women who were from France, I believe. And so my kids got to, meet other people from another culture. And it's probably, I like to think that, planting seeds in that they have both traveled to Europe now, my kids, and have been able to meet other people. So when you were also then talking about, the Martha Stewart thing and being afraid, I think also sometimes people get maybe stressed out, and it kind of comes to that point of, my house is a mess, or, how can I invite people over, or things like that. So what do you have to say, with regards to that? How do you advise people who maybe you are not the best housekeepers, let's say, but they would like to entertain, but, they feel, kind of, uncomfortable. It's not quite the word I'm looking for, but maybe embarrassed even a little bit. What do you say to that?
Well, a couple of things. One is that we do have to examine, why am I afraid? And is there some standard that I have artificially set in my head of the way it should be? And so many of those they're just lies, and you have to just say, that's not a reality. The reality is there's somebody I want to get to know, or there's somebody that needs to get to know me. And so we think about the people, not about us. We have to get our mind off of us and know that there's just power in opening the door and connecting with people. It's the presence. It's looking them in the eye. It's saying, hey, I would love to know your story. And giving them space, giving them room, letting them see the vulnerable you. The thing is, in this day and age, there are so many good takeouts. There's people that can do the cooking, but there's not the people to sit down and break bread with, because that's what we've closed our doors to. And that is where the power and the grace and the real change, and it just comes in, and that's what we're missing. That's what we need. That's what's so beautiful.
Well, let's get down to some practical things here, because what are some ways that we actually can start connecting deeply with people? And especially, I also want to be able to get into, well, you know what, I'm going to do that after. Let's just start first with that, because sometimes I overwhelm my guests. I ask two questions at the same time. So I'm going to limit myself today. So let's just start there. Well, how can we start to connect deeply with strangers?
Well, if we remember the word philoxenia, okay, loving strangers, we know a word and we use a word a lot that comes from a similar root, xenophobia, fear of strangers. And we have to overcome that, because that's just a fear of, that's really a vain imagination. We don't know if those are scary people or not. You know, we just don't know them, but we become hostile instead of hospitable. And so a lot of it is just looking, who do I need to know? We had the officer, kind of the safety officer in our town, come over and talk to our HOA. I've never been part of an HOA before. That's a new experience. It can be scary for a lot of people and wonderful. But our officer's name, his name was actually Louis Defense, Major Defense, which I just love the name. But he said, you know, you can put up neighborhood watch signs, but what you're doing here, we happened to invite a number of neighbors to our house that day, and he was giving a presentation, and he said, it's getting to know your neighbors. The safest way to live in your neighborhood is to know your neighbors and to have connections with them, and to you don't have to be best friends, but know who they are, know who is usually in your neighborhood. And if you know who's usually in your neighborhood and you know them well enough, then you'll know, oh, this so-and-so is having their brother in for a couple of days or something. You don't need to know everybody's business that way, but to go, these are the people that we have a lot in common. We have chosen to live on this street or in this building or whatever. We have that. Just get to know them. Don't be afraid of them. To make those kind of just basic connections will really enrich your life. And don't make the prejudgments on the people you don't know yet. Get to know them.
I love that. And it's so funny as you're talking, an old song is popping in my head. These are the people in your neighborhood. and any Sesame Street fan out there remembers that song. And yeah, you're right. It is about getting to know people. And I know for when we first moved into a neighborhood that, we didn't know people. We didn't even know our next door neighbors for the longest time, until finally, it might have taken a storm or something or other that we finally got to, meet. But it's so much richer when you can get to know people, and then you can look out for each other. And that's what it comes down to. What we're going to do, I'm going to take a quick break. And then when I get back, I want to talk to you a little bit more about actually how this applies to business and for our audience. So we'll be right back. And I just want to do a quick little message here. So if you have been enjoying the podcast, I just wanted to invite you to show your support by voting for Live, Love, Engage. We've actually been nominated for a Women in Podcasting Award in the Mindset category. And voting is open until October 1st, 2024. So you still have a little time left. And what you can do is you can go to womeninpodcasting.net/awards and just look for the mindset category, look for Live, Love, Engage, and you can give us your vote. And of course, I will have that in the show notes as well. And, we're talking about getting to know your neighbors, and that is really about getting to know people in your community. But also, there's a way to be able to foster community sometimes online, because we don't always live close to the people that we that we want to be able to connect with, people who are maybe of a similar mindset. And that's why I launched the Soulful Women's Network. And so if you are interested in connecting with a group of fun, creative, powerful women who support each other in business and life, I invite you to check out our free community. Just go to bit.ly/soul network. And with bit.ly, you have to make sure about the characters. So it's all lowercase for Soul Network. And of course, I will have that in the show notes as well. So let's go back, and we're going to go ahead and bring back our lovely guest here today. And we are going to continue our discussion, because I would like to know, because we do have a lot of entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, who are watching the show. So how do we apply this hospitality to our business?
Well, it's very similar. And what was interesting is I started doing a little deeper dive. I looked into the hospitality industry, which is going to be, it's like a $9 billion, 900,000 billion. I mean, trillion. It's a $1 trillion industry, because people like to be greeted. People like to be treated well. And so if you look up rules of hospitality, things like that, it all is industry driven, actually. And one of the rules is, if you see, it's the 5, 10, 15 rule. If somebody's 15 feet out, you make yourself aware of their presence. If they're 10 feet out, you kind of glance up, maybe you break contact with other colleagues. And if they're within 5 feet, you address them. You make eye contact and you talk. That's for the actual hospitality industry. But they have found that in many industries, in the healthcare industry, a simple smile and making eye contact is just huge for the image that your business portrays. And so it ends up really helping your bottom line, because people like your business because you have been hospitable, you've smiled. They know that there's kindness and friendship and a welcome to that business. And it's amazing. So if you've been stuck in your business, try smiling. And industries really work at trying to get their employees to smile, to use a kind voice, to be curious about the people they're engaging with, not just concerned about themselves and the work. And again, you don't want to be busybodies at work. You don't want to distract from the work at hand, but to incorporate a spirit of hospitality, of loving the strangers around you, both your colleagues, but then also the people that you're dealing with, your clients. And there's been a lot of studies about hospitable leaders, in particular, those who treat their employees in a family-like way. Again, there's boundaries, there's wisdom and all of that. But to retain employees this day, so many of our young people just want to know that they're important. They want to know that. And so a lot of workplaces are going to a family meal on Fridays, something like that, just literally sitting around a table and engaging in a community that cares, loving strangers as family. The 𝙃𝙖𝙫𝙚, it works.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting. I'm actually reading a book right now about the West Wing TV show. And that was something that they did make sure that they did, that they have lunches with not just the actors, but the whole crew. And they made a point of doing that we all sit down and break bread together, because they were all working on the same project, and they wanted to create an atmosphere where they could be able to do the best job that they possibly could. So I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm having an echo all of a sudden, but hopefully it will stop doing that. What is a commonly held belief about hospitality that you may passionately disagree with?
Well, I think it is that sense of, I have to have a big house, I have to have new furniture, or things like that. And one of my favorite stories is that true hospitality was shown to me on a park bench in France when I was a college student, and I was lost and I had no money, and it was a crazy set of things that got me there, circumstances. But I'm sitting alone in this park, and and there are bad people out there. This kind of creepy guy was creeping up on me, and I had nowhere to go. And I see this old woman, she's a peasant, sitting on a bench across from me. And I get up to go over, and as I approach her, she stands up, and I don't know if it was my facial expression, which I am not a good poker player, but it was like, oh, please don't leave. And she didn't. She threw her arms around me, sat down, gave me a place on her bench, and we chatted for the next hour. And Gloria, it was the most transforming experience. By the end of the time, she looked at me, she goes, oh, well, you've told me your story. You don't have any money. Are you hungry? Do you need something? And she pulled out a loaf of bread. She broke bread with me, literally. And it was just transformative. She didn't know I was coming. She didn't have a house. She didn't have gourmet food. She offered hospitality to a stranger who was me at the time in need. And I think if we would understand, there are people all around us, they might be the person in the grocery line ahead of us that just need to know it's okay to back up into your space. We have these force fields around us. Our homes have these garage doors that come down and the locks on the door. And, but we put that around ourselves too. And if we would get in the habit of like, God, make me gentle of your peace or whatever, but make me someone who allows the time and space and love for someone who might need me today, and just need to know they're loved. Practice that hospitality, love a stranger like family. And I just know it's life-changing. And I know it's contagious. If we can encourage people to do it, you come up with the most amazing stories that are true, that other people then begin to do it. Because the stories we hear are like stranger danger. Yes, that's the one that makes the news. But there's a million people out there that are just lonely, that just so need someone, and they have amazing stories. The immigrant people, and we've got more Afghans and curious people in our lives, and people go, "Whoa, aren't you afraid?" No, they are people. They are talented, wonderful people with hard stories that I grow and learn from the more I listen to. And
yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that. What would be one thing that somebody could do to, maybe like a little baby step that someone could start doing to be able to start leaning into this practice of being more hospitable? What do you recommend?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'd really like them to sit down and just, why am I afraid? Second thing, you have to get over the fact things are going to get broken or stained or whatever. Just get over it. That is stuff. Stuff gets replaced. Stuff we love, we might care about, we don't really care about it. People need to be cared about. And so is there somebody in my peripheral vision, maybe it's somebody even in my own house that I have not been hospitable to in a while? Is there somebody that I can break bread with this week? Make some kind of a commitment to just sit down and have a meal where you look people in the eye and you share a meal together. And I just challenge all the people in your audience to do that. Again, it might be, you might want to start in your own home. You might want to start with one of your own relatives, but start and then work up your courage to then reach out, get to know a neighbor, not all of them, but start with one. And it doesn't have to be the one, start with the one that you don't think you might think like. Get to know somebody who doesn't think like you. This is a great time to do it in an election year. It's really important to know why people think like they think, and you might not change anyone's mind, but you'll see the humanity in them, and you will understand they have a reason, and that's what makes our lives thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had a lovely interview with a gentleman a few weeks back about that, about having these conversations, and really, having difficult conversations sometimes, but being open. It is about listening. It's about being curious, asking questions, and then just be curious and listen, and also know that sometimes you do have to take care of yourself. And if the situation is getting heated, you don't have to stay in that conversation. You can say, you know what, thank you. Let's agree to disagree for now, and maybe come back
Yeah.
later, because you still have to take care of yourself no matter what.
Yeah.
Let's see. What else did I want to ask you about? Oh gosh, that went out of my head. Okay. Well,
You want a few quick,
yes.
things to think about.
Yes.
Keep a box of brownies, Ghirardelli brownies in the pantry. Okay. I asked my daughter-in-law, what have you learned about hospitality from us? She goes, you always have a box of brownies ready to go. It's great. Everybody loves a brownie. If they can't, they still love the smell of them. And just don't worry about the stuff. Think about blessing, not impressing. I have another friend who said, think about the connection, not the perfection. And don't be afraid. Just throw a blanket over the stuff. Pile in a corner, throw a blanket over the stuff. And, these are things I've done. Put them in a laundry basket. Just don't forget where you put it because, I've done that before too. But just be real. Allow yourself to be real and get to know the real people around you.
Yes, definitely. I love that. Well, I'm gonna throw a curveball at you because I like to do this to my guests once in a while. So I'm going to ask you, what are you curious about right now?
Oh my gosh, I am so curious. Right now I'm curious about these super moons, which sounds kind of crazy, but just you just somehow to get out of your own little space and just go, oh yeah, there's moons going around us. We're going around the sun. It's a great, big, amazing world that God created. And so those things delight me and get me out of my little thoughts. So I think that's my curious for the day.
I love it. And see, and that's why I love asking this question because I get all sorts of different answers. So I appreciate that. Is there anything else that I should have asked you about that I didn't? Any other last point? I know you've emphasized quite a few things, but anything else?
Yeah, I know a lot of your listeners and you yourself, that there's a spiritual aspect to everything. And I think to pray, to ask God to fill you with wisdom and courage, to get rid of any hatred, any preconceived prejudices. We have to get over those and just be curious about the people around you in the healthy way and in the Spirit of God way, and know that it's a good planet we're on. It's a good neighborhood you're in, and there's joy to be found.
I love it. Awesome. Well, if someone wants to learn more about your book or to learn more about you, where's the best place for people to find out?
Well, I do have a website, anniebooks.com, and you can always go from there. I'm on LinkedIn. I have a very untended Facebook page, but I'm learning those things. I've heard I can learn some from you. Those are good. And I'd be glad to, I'd love to hear from people. I want to know what their fears are. I want to know their stories, the good stories too.
All right. Excellent. And Annie Books, for those of you listening, I will have it in the show notes, but it's ANNIEBOOKS.com. So just want to be sure and let you know that. So thank you so much for joining us today and enlightening us on the practice of hospitality. And you're right. It really is about, just getting to know people, treating them as family, because we are all one part of one big human family. So that's why not get to know each other, right?
No time like the present. I know it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you again. And I also want to thank those of you who have been watching today. Thank you so much. And thank you for listening. If you're listening on your favorite podcast channel, if you're not subscribed, I hope you will make sure that you do that and leave us a comment or a review. And also same for on YouTube as well. Make sure that you hit that like button and subscribe. And until next time, I encourage you to go out and live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically.